Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Haley Deshane and I'm the events coordinator here at Eco Canada. Welcome to the Real Talk webinar version, Career and Stories. Before I start, I would like to take a moment to recognize the traditional Indigenous lands where Eco Canada's office is based in Calgary. At Eco Canada, we're committed to working towards respectful acknowledgement, collaboration, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples across Canada. This starts with acknowledging our honor and privilege to live and work within the Treaty 7 territory. Today we are presenting from the City of Calgary, home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. We would also like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Niitsitapi, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina Goodstoney, which include Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. I also just want to go over a few housekeeping guidelines for today's session to ensure that everyone can enjoy and participate effectively. So all participants are muted. Please check your audio settings to ensure you can hear us properly. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please use the chat function on the left-hand side of your screen, and we can do our best to resolve it for you. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for your viewing in 24 hours. Any questions that you have about the presentation or today's topic can be submitted through the question box. We will have a dedicated time period during the end to answer any questions from the audience. Finally, we really want to know what you think about our webinars and how we can keep improving. You'll be sent a short survey after the webinar ends. Please let us know what you think or if you have comments or suggestions about the webinar. Eco Canada's vision is to build the world's leading environmental workforce. Eco Canada seeks to help environmental workers succeed at each step of their career journey. To do this, Eco Canada has developed programs tailored to individuals at different stages of their career. Eco Canada also provides opportunities for new workers to break into the environmental sector through wage funding for co-op students and recent post-secondary graduates. And for those already employed as environmental workers, Eco Canada provides the Environmental Professional, EP, and Environmental Professional in Training, EPT, certifications, as well as EPT students. Lastly, Eco Canada provides opportunities for those with vast experience as environmental workers to provide guidance and direction to Eco Canada's products and programs through advisory committees. Now I'll pass it on to Eco Canada's project coordinator, Vanessa.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. So I am Vanessa Grushinsky, Eco Canada's project coordinator, and I want to give a little bit of a context before we start this discussion. The reason why we're having this webinar today is because Eco Canada has been involved in a project called Women in Leadership, which addresses systemic barriers within the workforce, right? So a bunch of research has been made for this project, and what was found is, and the reason why was because why underrepresented groups do not tend to ascend in leadership careers, right? Like that was the question behind why what the research was doing, and then patterns were found into this research that was later on defined as systemic barriers. So systemic barriers are something that are there is in the system of a company, for instance. So people tend to keep doing whatever they're doing for years on end, never changing, and that does not reflect much how society is nowadays, right? Because society is so diverse, people come and go from all different places in the world, so that has to resonate with how your company is built nowadays, right? And it's also proving that it's proved that companies that have a more diverse workforce tend to succeed better than the others that don't, because different perspectives, right, is so important. So yeah, one of the systemic barriers that we're going to talk today actually is hiring and retention. But I will put that into perspective of two people here, Sarah and Phoebe, that were part of underrepresented groups that made it into leadership. And they will talk about how they navigated these issues coming along, right, to succeed, and what they have been doing in order to grow their workforce, right, and to like not commit the same mistakes that people are doing to them moving forward with their workforce, with their employees. So now I will pass it to Phoebe and Sarah so they can introduce themselves a little bit, and then we can dive in into the discussion. Thank you very much. I think Phoebe can start.
Sure. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you to Eco Canada and for yourself for inviting me on the webinar today. So I'm Phoebe Dray. I work for a company, Dynamic Ocean Consulting, and we're based in Port Moody and the Lower Mainland, but we work all throughout BC and Nunavut. We're marine environmental consultants. The principal, Victoria, and Cameron have had the company now for almost 4 years, so it's a very new company. But Victoria and Cameron have both been working in the marine environment for their whole careers, so over 20, almost 25 years at least each in the marine environment. Cameron comes from a Coast Guard background, dive safety officer, and Victoria comes from marine biologist and consulting, permitting, regulatory background. I am personally an accountant, and I joined Dynamic Ocean just over 2 years ago after my family and I relocated from Australia. And I joined as a senior accountant, but within, I guess, 12 months of being with Dynamic Ocean, I was promoted to Director of Operations and HR, which was really exciting. And often many females in our organisation have been promoted within the
Ah,
organisation, which is fantastic.
hmm, awesome. Thank you, Phoebe. Now to you,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Great, thank you. And yes, thank you very much to Eco Canada for inviting me to be on the seminar today. My name is Sarah Cook. I'm the Executive Director of SeaChange Marine Conservation Society, which is a small environmental nonprofit based in Victoria, British Columbia. I just do want to acknowledge that I'm currently on the traditional territory of the Wasanich First Nation, so that is the Sakem, Sartlip, Sayout, and Pequotchin First Nation here on the Saanich Peninsula. But we do work all across the Salish Sea. So that's in southern BC, Washington State, so that area that's encompassed between Vancouver Island and Vancouver. And also for one of our programs, which is called Shore Zone, we do work all the way across Turtle Island. So that's what is now known as North America. So we've done work in the United States, as well as in this year, we're doing some work in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and we've done work up in Alaska. So we have a fairly wide-ranging um, base, and that's sort of partially because I used to be in a consulting background as well. So I started at Archipelago Marine Research, and then eventually had my own consulting company for a couple of years while I was home with kids, and then moved to a company called Coastal and Ocean Resources, where I eventually became the general manager, and then moved to executive director at SeaChange. And I actually kind of brought my team from Coastal and Oceans over to SeaChange. So it was kind of,
Mm.
I've had a bit of an unusual career path, but it's been interesting. But SeaChange has grown a lot in the last couple of years. So I took
Hmm.
over from our former executive director, Nikki Wright, who was also our founding executive director and had been here for 25 years. And we started with 3 people at that point, and then 3 years later, now we have 20 people. So it's been a bit of a growth journey for SeaChange over the last couple of years.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Wow, if we put the two of you together, we're going to cover most of the sea. So much work everywhere that you guys do. That's awesome. And yeah, the experience, wow, like coming back and forth, like, yeah, like, and growing into the career, like ascending, that must have been a lot of challenges for you people, right? Like, especially being an underrepresented group. And when I say underrepresented group, it means the minority people at your company. And sometimes, right, like, not as much as nowadays, but in the most, like, some years ago, the always the leadership has been for men, right, has been men only. So it must have been like really challenging for women to ascend. And that's what I want to start the discussions with. If you guys could share with us some experience of some systemic barriers that you addressed in the past, and how did you overcome it. Yeah, like that would be awesome to hear from you guys. And if you were the minority, right, and the board, if it was just men or there was uh another group, that would be great to hear as well. So who would you like to start with this, sharing this situation? Could be Sarah, could be Phoebe.
Sure, I can go ahead
Sarah.
and start.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, as a woman in a STEM career. So my background, I do have a degree in biology, and then I also got my master's and specialized in marine biology. And it's definitely been some challenges, although it is interesting that biology does tend to be more female dominated. It does tend to be more women. However, I have found that in leadership roles in most of the organizations I've worked with, it was still mostly dominated by men. And definitely some of the challenges I've had is that I think I tend to approach problem solving a little bit differently. I think I maybe have what would be considered a more traditionally feminine approach, in that I tend to be very collaborative, want to talk things out. That has gone over very well in the nonprofit world. In the consulting world, I've found that it was a different way of approaching things. I definitely did find I encountered a number of barriers when I became pregnant in the workplace, which was interesting because I certainly, and it's interesting that I encountered some of those from my female supervisors who basically told me I couldn't do field work because I was pregnant, even though I felt I could and my doctor said I could. And so it was a lot of times I found that decisions were being made for me, and that things were being, I was being told things rather than sort of sitting down and saying, hey, what can we do to figure this out? We're worried about you and want to make sure that you are doing well, or doing, not overextending yourself out in the field. So rather than having that conversation, I did find it was a lot of saying, well, no, you just can't do this. And that was unfortunately after a number of years of not being able to go out in the field, because unfortunately I was extremely good at my desk job. so, so there was a bit of pressure there to keep me at my desk job, because I was very fast at the job that I did, and I trained a lot of people, which was great. But I sort of found a lot of those experiences ended up going to men because they were seen as sort of stronger and more built for field work, whereas I was seen as more doing better at desk work. So I did have to fight through a lot of that. And I admit it wasn't something I necessarily was able to do at some of the companies that I worked for. But sort of when I came into my own as doing my own consulting work, and then as I sort of came to another company, Coastal and Ocean Resources, where they were just a lot more flexible. And I guess at that point I also had, my kids were a little bit more grown at that point. I had a little bit more flexibility to end up. So there was definitely some barriers that I faced, and that as a manager as well. Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, but I'll let Phoebe speak to what some of her challenges have been.
Okay, but I'll come back to you to know the resolution. So, okay,
Yes.
but Phoebe, can you share with us some barriers that you faced?
Sure. Fortunately, at Dynamic Ocean, we are actually a predominantly female organisation, so I haven't had the same challenges at Dynamic Ocean that maybe other employees in other types of STEM organisations may face. So we've been very fortunate to have a really strong female team, and we promote within the team. So within Dynamic Ocean, I haven't faced those types of systemic challenges, and I don't believe our team faces the systemic challenges that exist in other workplaces. However, in my professional career prior to Dynamic Ocean, I did have my own accounting firm, which my father and I owned and operated. So once again, I was the female leader there. And our team was mainly female as well. But we did sell that firm to another accounting firm who were owned and run by men. So there was, I think, 3 men as the leadership team there. And I really struggled within that organisation. My voice wasn't heard, and all the experience that I had gained from running and owning my own accounting firm wasn't listened to, it wasn't taken on board, and I was just put back into almost a junior accountant role within that organisation when we sold it. And I only lasted, we had to do a minimum of 1 year working with them, and then I think I ended up lasting about 1.5 years when I just realised that I didn't like being the technical accountant anymore in that role. I really enjoyed leadership and business leadership, and I really wanted a role where I had more leadership and my voice was listened to more. effectively. So I actually decided to resign from that position, which is unfortunate. The majority of their employees that actually did the technical work were female, and not one of them was promoted in any way, shape, or form while I was there. So you had the receptionists were all female, the accountants were predominantly female, but it was 100% male led organization, and there was a real barrier. And it was quite an old school boy club
Yep.
environment. So I didn't last there very long, and I didn't feel like my voice was heard. And it's a real shame because, you know, so many women are going into the accounting finance profession as they are now going into STEM. And I feel like it's a really big prejudice that's holding women back from achieving the goals that they wish to achieve within their professional career. And as Sarah said, you know, when someone becomes pregnant as well, often it sets them back years because they're kind of put to the back of the list again. So it is a real shame, and we'll have to see what the resolution is. But when you're a female-led organisation, I think there is a lot more opportunity because females have all been through the situation. I think most females, unless, you know, a lot of our employees are actually quite fortunate that they've joined us as junior biologists straight from university, so they may not have that same experience. So they might wonder what this systemic barriers is when they haven't experienced personally in the workforce. Yeah.
Yeah, career-based, at least systemic barriers, right? Yeah, that's interesting. And now, how you guys, like, so being in a leadership position now, how do you guys identify, how do you guys accommodate and keep the culture open to diversity? Do you guys, how can you guys give me an example right now, like how you're making sure that this is not happening to any more people? Phoebe
Yeah, it's honestly, it's
or
oh,
Sarah?
sorry,
Sorry.
Phoebe.
No, no, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead,
Go ahead.
Sarah.
Well, it's interesting because when I first came into leadership role, it was at my previous company that I was working with, and it was kind of in a bit of a moment of crisis, which was that the previous manager had to be let go, and I was promoted, which I was very grateful for the opportunity and for the trust that they had placed in me. But I was also finding myself in a situation where we were owned by, again, a larger parent company, which was predominantly uh, male, either owned or managed. And I found myself not really enjoying that situation too much, or enjoying, you know, sort of the HR situation. So when the opportunity came to move to SeaChange, it was very forefront of my mind that I wanted to try and do things differently. And you know, I sort of brought over this workforce that came from a consulting company and brought into a nonprofit, and then we ended up hiring a bunch of new people. So at SeaChange, we genuinely, other than myself, have no one here who's been here longer than 3 years. So we are almost basically a brand new organization, and it was really important to me that I try to promote from within, that when we're hiring people, we're really looking to do that with a lens of you know, diversity, and try and do that. And to be honest with you, it's been a challenge and a bit of a struggle. I've tried to implement a few hiring policies that we didn't really have a strong enough structure in place internally. And I think what I realized is that we hadn't perhaps built the team up enough, and the people who are in leadership within this organization didn't really have the training in the background, because it's not just enough to say, hey, we want to hire people from more diverse backgrounds. You actually have to be able to accept and have things in place within your organization. And there was a couple of incidents that sort of brought to me the knowledge that we did not have that, and that in fact, you know, trying to hire a more diverse group of people, particularly in our case from First Nations, because we work very, very closely with a lot of First Nations. And it's important to me that we have people who are represented here within the communities that we're working with, sort of realizing that we need to do more in order to make sure that this work environment is as comfortable and accepting and welcoming as possible, which is actually one reason I was so thrilled when Eco Canada reached out with some of the programs that they were doing, because I think it's going to help make sure that we have those internal policies. So for me, it was sort of a recognition of that journey, that it's not necessarily something that can happen organically. sometimes maybe it can, but within our organization, it was something that wasn't necessarily going to happen as organically, but something that we needed to have
Mm-hmm.
appropriate structures in place. And so I'm in the midst of making sure we have that happen so that we can grow and we can move much more towards it. I will say that we do have pretty much all of the managers, I think, except one within SeaChange are female. So we do sort of have a very um, dynamic group
Mm-hmm.
within, in terms of our gender identities. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're working towards having more equity in terms of um,
Mm-hmm.
other groups that we would like to see represented.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, like when you are the person that starts to lead the change is so much on you because like kind of have to make sure that people see what you're seeing, but being the starter, yeah, can be hard. So kudos for you, Sarah. And what about you, Phoebe?
I
How have
guess
you been? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say similar to Sarah, we are a relatively new company, and so a lot of our policy and procedures haven't been implemented and haven't been on, taken on board by the company as of yet. And we're still working on them and working closely with Eco Canada and looking at the diversity and the policies that Eco Canada has prepared and the guidelines for developing your policies,
Mm-hmm.
the human resource policies these are. So we've been reviewing those and making sure it's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been reviewing the policies that Eco Canada has prepared and the guidelines and the different policies that an organisation should have within their company. And we've been making sure that when we do develop our policies and start implementing, which is still an ongoing process, so we're not there
Mm-hmm.
yet, but that we are taking in mind that they are inclusive. They do embrace diversity within the workplace and equity, and making sure that all employees feel comfortable and can have a voice and don't feel that they are unheard or not respected in the workplace. Something that
Mm-hmm.
we've implemented is that I'm the person often that the staff members can come to. So if they have any challenges or they have any concerns, or they want to air anything with me, it's a very confidential conversation, and they can come to me and talk to me about anything, and we can brainstorm and come to some solutions that work for them and enable them to stay positive and engaged in the workforce. Because I find when people feel like they're unheard or unappreciated, they can disengage, and often you won't, what is it, they just will remain staying working with the organization, but they're unengaged and they're not interested in working for the best outcome for the organization as a whole. So we want to really make sure that the employees feel like they're heard, they feel like they're appreciated, and they feel comfortable and safe to come in and talk to at least me, if not someone else within the organization, where they can and have that conversation and feel safe. Because I feel that at the end of the day, everyone just wants to feel appreciated and heard, and that they're valued. So I work really hard to make sure that our team feels that way. We have had challenges with the hiring process, where especially it's very interesting. We've been doing a lot of hiring over the last year and a half or so, and it's interesting to see the different genders and how they
Mm-hmm.
represent themselves and how they promote themselves and how
Ah,
they discuss their skill set. And we've found that often once it actually comes time to hiring an employee, sometimes the people that have over sold themselves, their skill set doesn't actually match with what they believe it should be, where another gender will undersell themselves, and then when they start working, their skills and
yes,
their technical ability
yes.
far outweighs. So we've been implementing tests for as part of our HR process now, recruitment process. So we're looking at developing tests to actually test someone's skills and abilities so that we make the right hiring decision, and then there's not concerns, because it's very hard when you've got one employee who's at a certain level and then another employee that's at a lower level, and they're reviewing work of the person at the high level who had sold themselves much more effectively in the interview process. We've now realised that they're not at that level, and it's a very challenging situation to be in, and not good for the employee who's categorized at not such a high level, realizing that their skill set is actually much higher than the other person, can be very discouraging when they're trying to work their way
Absolutely.
through and develop their skills and promote themselves within the organization as well. So that's something we have implemented in the recruitment process. And they're technical tests. They're not necessarily soft skill tests or those types of things. But it's just to really see whether they've got the skills that they say they have and that they can bring that to the organisation. So that's something very new that we've implemented. And we just did it recently with our first candidate, and they've worked out really well. So that's been a really positive outcome for implementing that within our recruitment process.
Before I pass it to Sarah, can you give an example of this test?
So we've just hired a project administrator for one of our for our company, and we've really, to be honest, we've really struggled to find a project administrator that actually has the skill set that we require. So we developed a document, a Word document, a report style document where we messed it all up and made mistakes in it and changed the formatting and the font. And we asked them gave them our style guide, and then we asked them to reformat the document within our style guide and to fix any errors that they found. So that was a really good test, and she did really great job of that. We also gave her like a CV of like one of our employees who was in the style that they prepared it in and had sent it to us, because we've got a very set way that we prepare CVs for proposal documents and for promotional documents. So we asked them to format the CV or resume of one of our current employees in the correct Dynamic Ocean formatting structure, and did it really well as well. We do need to refine the test. It took the poor lady quite a bit longer than we anticipated. I think she ended up being in the office for about 2.5, 3 hours rather than the 1 hour that we anticipated.
Wow.
But she did a really great job, and so we could hire her with comfort, knowing that she could actually have the skill set that required to do the work. So we have huge, I'm sure Sarah has the same, but we have huge reports that we develop and huge proposal documents that can be, 60 to 100 pages in length. And when you're the technical scientist doing it, often it's hard to pick up. You've spent so long looking at the document and reviewing it and adding comments that sometimes it's really hard to pick up all of the formatting and the grammar and all the other issues. So it's good to have that project administrator that can do the final review and ensure the document's well presented, because that's our product that we're in essence selling to our clients and our customers. So we need to make sure they're well presented.
That's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Phoebe.
It's okay.
And now, Sarah, getting back to how do you make sure people don't go through what you did, like being in a leadership position now?
Yeah, I think part of it is really sort of I've been focusing a lot on my management team lately. So we have, when you're growing very quickly as an organization, a lot of the times the nitty gritty and the training and things like that can get very lost in terms of, you put people in these positions, and basically everyone we have, again, as a manager, it was one of their very first times being managers. They had lots of experience, great technical skills. And it was sort of one of those things where I realized we weren't quite being cohesive as a leadership team within the organization. So we actually started working with an HR company, which actually we've been working with them sort of right since the very beginning, and had them, for example, reviewing all of our contracts, reviewing our internal processes, because also we've got about 20 people now, but we don't have the ability to have a full-time HR person. So by default, myself as the executive director tends to be the default HR person, or the managers are the default HR people for their teams. But we wanted someone who was outside the organization and someone who people could go to if, for example, someone had a problem with me. They can't really necessarily don't feel comfortable talking to me about it. We have someone who they can then talk to, who can then bring the issue to me and can try and help us figure out a resolution. So we didn't want to put ourselves in a position where we didn't have any oversight of the people who were sort of providing the HR for the organization. So we went through a lot of that. That's actually been a really great process for us, and also having those people provide training to myself and to the managers within the organization and helping us. We went through the process of creating a team agreement as well. So we sat down with all of our employees, and our HR company took us through basically a brainstorming exercise of what do we want our workplace to look like. And and it's funny, the person we were working with said one of the unique things that came out of it was sort of one of the top things was like, we want to be our authentic selves at work.
Wow.
And it was one of those things where it's like, we want to actually, like, if I'm having a bad day, I'd like to be able to not, treat my coworkers badly, but be able to say, I'm having a really bad day. I'm I'm maybe not able to handle this meeting today, and have the other people saying, you know what, that's great. Thank you for letting us know. Let's either reschedule, or do you need to, need some time, or can we do it later? But to be able to acknowledge when you're having challenges, and to be able
Mm-hmm.
to um, have the other people on your team understand that that is a priority, that your mental health is a priority, um, and that it is something that will affect you at work. I mean, there's no doubt that
Exactly.
if you're, I mean, like if one of your pets just passed away, I
Yeah.
would not expect that person to then be in a meeting the next day or be able to be fully
Mm-hmm.
functional in that meeting. But I've definitely been in workplaces where you're just expected to power through that, and you're just expected to sort
Yeah.
of, you've got to leave that stuff at home. And it's like, well, I mean, there's also the fact we're all remote, we're all working at home, so
Mm.
That is true. Yes, yes.
I'm right here. I'm right here where all that stress was happening. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, particularly as a remote workforce, being able to be open, because you can't have those conversations in the hallway or the conversations in the kitchen to know someone's
Mm-hmm.
having a bad. So being able to create that environment. So that team agreement I found was really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped, and particularly because I was not leading that session and none of the
Mm-hmm.
managers were, but from outside the organization, who was like, this is a roadmap all of you can follow, and just sort of basically laid out, even, we expect emails to be answered within 24 hours, things like that, just laying out some of those things, saying this is what a respectful workplace looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So we started putting pieces in place, which has been really, really helpful.
Yeah,
But
and
it's definitely
opening. Yes, for sure. But it's like what I can see from you and Sarah is just like being very open to conversations, right? Like check what other people are feeling, like making a support system kind of like in order to be able to succeed in your career, right? So yeah, that's very, very important. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. And so for the hiring, you mentioned something very interesting to me the other day, that you don't look much in, like when you're hiring, you don't look much into the technical, you focus on something else. Can you share here with people,
Mhm.
because it will resonate with what Phoebe said as well? So if you could share,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
So certainly it's for our entry level positions. We definitely have some positions that we need to have a certain technical skill set, but we have
Hmm.
positions here, our shore zone mappers, just sort of our entry level position. We're often hiring people who are right out of university, or things like that. One thing we did notice over time was that we would hire people who have a great technical skill set, and they really did have that great technical skill set, but weren't necessarily um, good at the mapping, or didn't fit well with the team. Um, and part of that is because the mapping that we do, it's a highly repetitive task, but it requires a high level of accuracy. And so what we discovered is that we were basically training people from scratch every time
Mm-hmm.
with the protocol that we used. And so we started focusing a lot more on the soft skills, and sort of realizing that maybe, hiring someone with a biology degree for our biology mapping team, that's great, that might work out. But honestly, hiring someone who was very willing to learn, very willing to acknowledge mistakes, who was good at pattern recognition, who was sort of flexible, who was an open communicator, that even if those people didn't have any biology background, they were doing better in the position,
Mm-hmm.
because we were essentially training them with all the skills that they needed. So certainly for some of our positions, we've been switching to a focus a lot more on soft skill and people who are going to be good members of the team, because a big thing about that team is communication too, because we have people who are mapping parts of the coastline, and they use imagery to do that. So they're looking at the imagery. And a big part of that is consistency within the team. We don't want people looking at something and, over here, someone's calling it green algae and someone else is calling it, red algae or something, just as a crazy example. But we want them to be talking to each other a lot and communicating with each other a lot and being consistent in any given area. So we actually discovered the ability to work as a member of the team was more important in that case than any of sort of the technical skills that were coming in. So it's
Interesting.
kind of an almost an, and again, we definitely have other positions like our lead researcher and things like that who needs a certain level of technical skill. But it was an interesting note that for some positions we actually felt that switch to a focus on soft skills was working a lot better. So
That's
we actually
amazing.
hired someone who had a social sciences degree, was actually in anthropology, I think, and as one of our co-op students, and actually it was far and away like an amazing mapper because they were so willing to listen and so willing to learn from their other team members. That yeah, it was definitely an eye opener for us, and it's led to us some good success with adding some team members.
That's awesome. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing experience. Thanks for, yeah, and thank you for opening it up for like people to actually like giving them a chance, right? Like if yeah, why
Yeah.
not? If they're looking into doing and are looking into learning, like why not? Just gonna base them on their skill set? No, right? If they can succeed any other way, just open up, give them the opportunity. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. So now, since you mentioned retention with online, right? Like, cause I know that the two of you have a lot of remote work, and some of them are exclusively remote, right? So how do we retain these people? Like, how can we understand them to make the workplace work for them if they are online? Right, like that's a challenge nowadays, and for retention too, because sometimes the person that's online is overlooked, and then I don't know, you cannot engage with them very well. So then they end up receiving the end of the stick, right? Like, or maybe being laid off because they were not engaged very well. So since the two of you have a lot of hybrid workers, and sometimes 100% of the time, sometimes it's like remote. So how do you make sure that they keep in the company and they show their colors and they are involved?
We
Maybe,
do. I could start first if you like.
yeah, yes.
So we do regular team meetings. So we have a Tuesday and a Thursday team meeting where everyone logs in no matter where they're from, and I feel like that really helps to keep the team engaged. And we always introduce. If there's a new team member, we always do an introduction. No matter how many times everyone's heard everyone else's introduction, we always all introduce ourselves so that the new team member can feel like they've gotten to know each of the team members and what their role is within the organisation. So we make sure we have those team meetings regularly, and everyone's expected, unless they're in the field or on vacation or away for some reason, they're expected to attend those team meetings. And we also discuss anything that's happening in the company. We celebrate any anniversaries of our team members, birthdays, and we also go around and do a bit of a round robin of what each of us are working on and what we're currently focused on within the organisation. So we can kind of see, the accounting and administration team can understand what the technicals teams are doing and vice versa. So you have a bit of an understanding about what everyone's working on within the organisation. And we also then have the opportunity to say, I need to speak to another team member after this meeting as I need some support on something. So it just gives a way for the whole team to engage, understand what each other is doing within the organisation, and to celebrate those anniversaries. We also discuss a safety moment often at those meetings. So especially on the Thursday meeting, someone will bring up a safety moment for everyone to share with the team. And we'll then discuss that. We talk about people's vacation if they've just gotten back from vacation. And so it's not necessarily all work related. It's also a bit of a way to help build the culture of the team and to learn more about your fellow colleagues. I feel once you feel like you're part of a team as well, like you don't have that same incentive to kind of job hop, which I find, with remote work, if you don't feel engaged or part of the team, you're not as loyal. So it's often easy to just job hop a bit more and change organizations more quickly because you don't feel like you're really part of a team. So I think it's a really great way. And then we have different meetings for different things throughout the week as well. So we don't try and have overkill of meetings, but we definitely like to have that meeting twice a week so that the whole team can be engaged.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Okay. Thank you, Phoebe. And what about you, Sarah?
So yeah, it's definitely been a challenge because pre-COVID,
Mm.
I'd never been in a remote position or had any remote workers, and sort of we got forced into that real fast. I still
Mhm.
remember it was sort of, I was the general manager at the consulting company and trying to figure out how to get everybody home and trying to, do that. And once we got there, trying to figure out how to keep us all engaged and in touch with each other, it was definitely a bit of a mess then. So, but it was fortunate that I could take some of the lessons I learned into coming into SeaChange because we didn't have an office. We'd lost our office during COVID. And so the question became, do we want, it was sort of a conversation we all had, do we actually want to have an office? Because having an office in Victoria, I'll be honest with you, is very expensive.
Yep. Mhm.
And what
Mhm.
we discovered is that most people really preferred having a good chunk of their time at home. So we actually do have a small office now that has some what we call hot desks. So people can just come in and use those if they want to come, but it's also a meeting space for smaller groups. So people do have the ability. So we have sort of a couple of different teams within SeaChange. We have 3 teams within SeaChange that will each meet once a week together. And we sort of always start out with like, how was your weekend? And like a sort of set, 5-10 minutes of socializing time at the beginning of each meeting. Sometimes we ask silly questions. Like I remember one time I attended one of the meetings and the question was, if you were a soup, what soup would you be? And I remember just sitting there going, oh, this is not good. I don't know what to say, but it really makes you think. And it honestly, it was amazing how much we learned about our coworkers, what kind of soup they thought they would be.
That is
So we
funny.
try and do, funny, silly things like that at the beginning, not taking up the whole meeting because we don't want to be, doing that. But we also, I also have one-on-ones with each of my managers, so the manager of the teams during the week. So we again try not to overkill with meetings, but it's trying to make
Mhm.
sure, and then they in turn have one-on-ones with each of their team members. So it's about connecting as a group, but sometimes you get people in a group who aren't necessarily speaking up as much, and so it's making sure that they still have that contact and that ability to say, "Hey, I didn't really feel comfortable saying this in front of the group." So we've kind
Mhm.
of instituted those meetings as well. And then we have a social staff appreciation committee that organizes the social event once a month.
Mhm.
And you can come if you want. It's not mandatory or anything like that. But we also have a couple of team members who are not in Victoria, so they live up island. And one of the things that I instituted was paying for their time and their mileage to attend to those, so that if they choose to
Oh.
attend, their time and their mileage are paid for to come down to Victoria or come over from Vancouver. We'll pay for the ferry, things like that. So we don't want to put any barriers in place for those team members if they're able
Mhm.
to come down because there's a few people who aren't in Victoria, and I really didn't want those people to feel excluded. Because that is very difficult when you get everyone together. And we also have a monthly in-person staff meeting that we do as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to get to know each other, but it's something that we learned over the last couple of years, putting all those things in place.
Mhm. Yeah.
Something we started out with, and we kind of learned the hard way that it could lead to a lot of disconnections. So that was sort of
Yeah.
kind of worried.
And
Sometimes we both done it a little, but everyone seems happy at the moment. So we'll
mhm.
we'll figure out that sweet spot.
And Sarah, you mentioned that you guys don't have an office, right, that fits everyone. So how do you do the in-person monthly meetings?
We have to rent a space. So we actually rent a
Oh,
space at
okay.
that can fit. There's 20 of us now.
Yeah.
We kept having to rent a bigger and bigger space, but we actually
Yeah.
found one of the rec centers locally, and they actually give discounts to nonprofits, which was nice. So we rent that space
Interesting.
once a month
Hmm.
to get everyone together. Yeah, and then
That's
for the
awesome.
social events, it's either something outdoors or every one time we went to the board game cafe, things like that, somewhere you can sit, everybody and things like that. So it's definitely a bit of a challenge when you got more people, but it's something that we've been
Yeah.
able to we sort of have a little budget we set aside for that
Hmm.
each year as well. We've been lucky enough to be able to do that. So yeah, try and find
Hmm.
some fun things to do together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Great, great talks about hiring and retention, guys. Thank you very much. Um, do you guys, because we're approaching the time for questions, so I would just like to ask you guys if you want to add anything else, like in regards to, because I think that some people are over here because they really want to hear from the background, right? Because you guys are on the background, you guys are on the hiring side, not not the hiree per se. So
Mm.
is there anything else that you would like to speak to these people if they're like a minority, underrepresented, like some tips in anything, and then we can open for questions.
Mhm. I think with Sarah talking about the soft skills and the people hire not just for the technical. So maybe when you're preparing your resume, your CV, and you're applying for jobs, really try and sell or promote the different, not just your technical skills. So if you do have experience being the committee member of a certain university organization, or you've done something that's Toastmasters, or different things that can bring different value to an organization apart from your technical skills, it can help really stand you out as as a well-rounded someone that can bring more value to the organization as well. So if if organizations are starting to look for more soft skills and how you can fit into the organization and how you can relate, and we always find it's really important for when candidates are applying for our jobs that we really like to have a cover letter
Mm-hmm.
prepared and sent in with the resume. So looking at your cover letter, and there's lots of support services out there, I believe, and a lot of services that are often provided by not-for-profits for people who are from the diverse or a minority group. And so you can get support of how to prepare your resume and your cover letter to really stand out and present yourself well. So I think really look at the different services that are out there that can help you to really make yourself stand out,
Mm-hmm.
and not just trying to highlight all of your technical skills, but looking at how
Mm-hmm.
the other things that you can bring to the organization as well. Because I'm sure it is quite a competitive employment market out there for some roles. So really being able to help yourself stand out can really help to get you to that interview, to then get the foot in the door for that job. And also being proactive and actually not just waiting for a job to be advertised, but if you see organisations that you'd like to potentially work for,
Ah.
really starting to reach out to other people that work there and asking them about the organisation and who the key people are that they need to meet with, and really doing things that are not just applying for a job that's been advertised, but really putting yourself forward and starting to build your networks and starting to build your relationships with the different organisations. Because often when there is a job available, the person that is doing the hiring will look at the relationships as well that may have been formed, or they're really proactive and they've actually reached out to me and they've reached out to the team members, and might help you to stand out more to get the foot in the door for that first position. And you may not be the position that you necessarily want in the organization, but once you're in there, then often organizations will promote within, so then you can step up to that position that you're really aiming for once you're within the organization as well.
Mm. Great, great tips. Thank you, Phoebe. And anything else, Sarah, that you
Yeah,
like
I
to
think,
add?
for people who are, if you're encountering um, difficulty in your career path trying to get where you want to go, there is a certain level of persistence that is required.
Oh boy, yes.
Sometimes, yeah, and as something my mom used to say to me, which was, "Don't let the turkeys get you down." Which is, if you're encountering, I used to have a lot of mansplaining, um, which
Oh
was
God,
super fun. I
yeah.
actually had one boss that I worked with where I had a agreement with a male coworker because I would make a suggestion in the meeting, it would be immediately dismissed, and then if he thought it was a good suggestion, he would make the suggestion, and it was usually accepted at that point.
Oh God.
So it was things like that that just, drive you absolutely bananas, and, could have definitely driven me away from this as a career.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say definitely don't stay somewhere if it's that detrimental to your mental health. But in the end, there are those people out there who are going to see you, who are going to appreciate you, who are going to give you those opportunities. And sometimes it's just a matter of being, persistent and being willing to believe in yourself. That was sort of the big thing for me, was kind of, at those moments of being able to say, I know I can do this, especially when you have
Mm-hmm.
terrible imposter syndrome, which I have had, many,
Mm-hmm.
many times in my career. It's like, I'm an executive director, really? I mean, it's like, what, I'm
Right?
running this
Yeah.
organization? You've got to be kidding me.
Huh. Huh.
And you have those moments, but it's that believing in yourself, and knowing that there are a lot of other people out there struggling, and reaching out to groups to connect. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say, continue to find that belief in yourself, inside, and you'll get there in the end.
I agree with you. Confidence is a big one. As soon as
Yeah.
you know what you're talking about, like, and you believe in yourself, and yeah, you're gonna go far, super far. That's what happened to me, actually. Yeah. As soon as I became a mom, I was so confident, like I wouldn't take anything for granted, and that just boosted me. So confidence is a very big one. I super agree.
I think
Okay,
also
thank
finding,
you.
oh,
Yes.
oh, just
No, go
one other
ahead,
thing
Phoebe.
is finding a mentor often can help. So if you have
Yes.
finding a mentor that you can work with, and often if you've seen someone who's done something that you'd like to do or like to achieve, like if you saw Sarah and you'd like, well, I'd love to be the executive director of a not-for-profit one day, like you can reach out to people and say, would it be okay for me to have a virtual coffee with you, just to,
Yeah.
I'm wanting to develop my career and I'd love to have some feedback on some things or whatever it is. And so finding that mentor, it may have been one of your university lecturers, or it could be someone in the profession, maybe at a different organization. And they're often, people are often really willing and excited to help someone else progress in their career. So finding a mentor that might be able to support you. And I believe Eco Canada maybe has a mentorish program that can also help.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually how you address one systemic barrier, is to have a membership, allyship in a structure in your company. So like even with the people that just get in, they're welcome to talk to the VPs and to the presidents. Like everybody's very, very open for allyship, and that's how you put down those systemic barriers for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, ladies. Such a great conversation. So let's open now for the questions. Um, Haley?
Hi. That was awesome, ladies. Thanks so much. We have a few questions here. So just to start off, Christina asks, she's found the lack of technical skills to really be a barrier for her. So she's wondering if you have any resume recommendations to emphasize soft skills.
Hmm.
I find and I just something Phoebe touched on was I find that cover letters often really speak to me. Like we recently just hired part-time project coordinators with half-time position. We had 96 applicants. So it was,
Oh my
it was
God.
actually rather distressing how many underemployed people there were out there who were
I
just needing a
know.
part-time position. But
Yeah.
to be honest with you, a lot of what made the difference with a lot of the people we interviewed was people who wrote a really good cover letter, because there were a lot of very skilled people, and who really let their passion for the job shine through. Like it wasn't just sort of a very formulaic cover letter, but it really sort of spoke about who they were as a person, and what their passions were and what they would bring to positions. So I mean, and that's just from my own personal experience, but I find a really good cover letter is very can often make the difference between if I've got two resumes that are looking fairly similar, or one that doesn't maybe look like they have quite the same level of technical skill, that can often say, hey, but I really would like to meet this person.
I see. Okay. So leaving a little bit like of your personality shows, right? Just not like,
Yeah,
yeah, not just reading the job description as a like checklist, right? Like I can do this,
yeah,
I can do this. Just okay, okay. Nice.
And also,
Okay.
but why do
there
you want the
are,
job?
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Why
really
do you want
selling
the
it
job?
like you're open to learning. If your technical skills aren't maybe
Yeah.
at the level where someone is, but you really love to learn and you want to develop your skills. And then even just seeing if there are any online courses. Eco Canada has lots of courses or anything that
We
can
do.
help
We do. Yeah.
improve those technical skills just a little bit. And there's lots of micro courses or webinars that you can attend that can help improve those skills. They might not be a university credential, but there are lots of things that is available online, especially that are
Hmm.
relatively good cost-effective options to help improve those technical skills. But I definitely think the cover letter to sell yourself and your willingness to learn and your passion for the organization and what you can bring to the organization
Hmm.
outside of your technical skills can definitely help with that process.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome. Thanks, girls. Yeah, and Nico Canada can definitely help. If you like to know some guidance, just put it on the chat and then I can reach you out after this conversation here if you want some help with writing resumes and whatnot. So, okay, next question, Haley.
Yeah, thanks, ladies. Definitely, Eco Canada has a lot of resources that can help too. We do offer trainings. We have online asynchronous trainings. We also offer synchronous virtual training. So we actually have one coming up in September, September 9th, 11th, 16th, and 18th. We have a training called Managing Yourself and Inspiring Others. So that could be definitely just updating those soft skills and things like that. And yeah, but next question, we have someone who wants your advice about taking a demotion to try and switch sectors. They fear they're getting rejected from jobs they love because they're seen as overqualified.
That can be a difficult one. That can be a difficult one. I have to admit it's and yeah, taking demotion is such a difficult step to take. I think that's in the end probably something that has to be a very personal decision whether it's worthwhile for you, but it may also be something that in terms of job applications, if you are able to put something of the thought process into the cover letter to sort of, tell people that you maybe understand that on paper you look a little overqualified, but you are in fact wanting to learn and wanting to make a switch, to make a change, that can maybe help them to understand that that's not necessarily going to be a barrier to being a good member of the team. But yeah, Phoebe, do you have anyone
I think
anyone that
Sarah,
you've
what you've
hired?
yeah, we have hired people from not necessarily who were marine environmental scientists, but maybe terrestrial or not a specific marine, but they've wanted to, they've really sold themselves on, I would love to be in the marines environment and working within the marine environment, and I bring these skills from my previous experience, but I know there's going to be learning, and often saying, I'm willing to do, and I'd like to do that learning, and I don't have the expectation that the company necessarily will provide me all of the time to do that, but I do, and I'm willing to do extra learning on my own time to learn the skills that I need to step into this role. And I think that enthusiasm and that passion to change sectors and saying that you understand that it's maybe a step down from where you've been, but because of the experience you have had to date in your career, you feel like you're going to be able to step up quite quickly in this organisation and learn the skills you need to learn quite quickly to be able to become an effective team member and potentially, promote or step through the organisation rapidly to step up to the level that you are now. So even though it may be demotion initially, that because of the skills and the experience that you do have, it may not be as long a setback in your career. But I guess understanding the reasons why you personally want to do that, and if it's worthwhile for yourself, because at the end of the day, it's yourself personally that has to go home at night and look in the mirror and understand that you've maybe taken a step back in your career, but it's a step back that you're willing to take because you really wanted to go on this new trajectory, and knowing that if you put in that extra work and time, potentially outside of work hours that may not be paid, but it will help you to step back up to the level that you were at previously, at a quicker rate than you may have gained that position in the first place, may help. And explaining that to the recruiter, and the cover letter I think is a really great place initially, because that's somewhere where the person that's doing the hiring process is going to read that cover letter to understand your reasons first.
Interesting. Reasons
Because I
first.
guess when you're hiring someone, there is always that concern that you spend many hours doing the recruitment process, and the recruiter may, and the HR manager may be concerned that we're going to spend 10, 20, upwards 100 hours trying to get this person to a certain level. But if you can clearly explain to them your why that you'd like to do that and the reasons behind it and what you're willing to do to make the situation work, then that kind of takes away that risk of them hiring you and then it not working out.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you have another question, Haley?
Unfortunately, we are out of time. So I
Oh,
just want to thank both you ladies, Phoebe and Sarah, for this. This was very informative. The audience had lots of questions and really was praising you in the chat and stuff. So thank you both for sharing your experiences. Anything else you want to say, Vanessa?
No, not at all. I had a great time having this conversation with you, Sarah and Phoebe. Thank you very much for accepting being in this webinar. And yeah, I have been in touch with them every month, every 3 months, anyways. So I'll be involved with them more. But yeah, thank you very much for the insights. It was very, very good. And
Thank you for
yeah,
having us.
yeah, yeah. I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Hope you have
Thank
a
you very
great
much for
rest of
having us.
the day. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, awesome.
Bye bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye bye.